My advice would be, again, the three conversations thing. Find out as much as you can about the profession. Invite people to coffee, invite people to lunch, and make it clear that you're not trying to get them to give you a job, because that'll turn them off. Just make it informational. I just want to know about the profession, and also I want to know about you.
So, welcome to the You Are Lawyer podcast. Keith Shannon, how are you today?
I'm fine. I am happy to be here. It's good to see you after hearing all those episodes that you've had. I've been following you.
Well, thank you so much for listening. That's always such a treat. I just received an email the other day about someone who started working with one of the guests, and it was a 2-year-old episode that they had listened to. And I was like, podcast content is evergreen, but it's good to have those reminders. You're like, yeah, people are listening all the time. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, for our podcast, I get little notes all the time from old episodes. It's pretty interesting.
yeah. So we were just talking about that before we started recording. What is the name of your podcast and who do you host it with?
Well, the name is Fourth Row Center, which is supposedly the best seat in the house in a theater. Actually, I think Third Row Center is supposedly the best seat, but that title had already been taken, so we moved back a row. So it's Fourth Row Center, and I co-host it with my daughter, Kara, who lives in New York now and is an aspiring actress. She's my younger of my two daughters.
Yeah, okay. And so did you get into theater because she is into theater, or have you always been into theater and musical arts and all of that?
Well, much to the chagrin of my wife is a physician, and wanted both girls to go into science and math and things that would probably pay a lot of money. Uh, but I worked in theater. My mom was an amateur musician and actress, and so when I was in, I don't know, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, there was this summer music theater in the hills of eastern Kentucky, where I'm from, and she was in the theater during the summer. And so the only way that anyone would pay attention to me during the summer would be if I got involved in the theater as well. So I started working in this summer theater, and it turned out to be this amazing thing. The guy that managed it ended up being Tennessee Williams' literary agent. And years later, and there were some famous people that came through there, and the bug bit me. And so I've been a theater geek all my life, and I passed that along to the kids. And we used to listen to show tunes in the car and stuff like that, and so they both actually veered toward entertainment.
Yeah, that's really cool. The other day, my husband and I were going somewhere, and I was like, is this the Phantom of the Opera? And he just had it playing. And I was like, it's like a Tuesday. What do you. So we're big musical theater people as well. I grew up listening to the Rent soundtrack and had no idea what they were talking about. And then when I became an adult, I actually watched it, and I'm still obsessed because I had already known all the songs. But I was fascinating with the storytelling that could happen from the music, even not knowing anything about, right? Like the song about Light the Candle. And then when I saw it for the first time, I was like, what? Like, this is amazing. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we listened to the Wicked soundtrack from the get-go, every word of it. And it's one of those things you listen to 100 times. You just know every note of it. So that's how the podcast came about. It's almost like sports nerds talking about sports, and they use shorthand, talk about ERAs and things like that. And so we were talking one day using shorthand, talking about our favorite actors and actresses and people who had come into shows. And I thought, this sounds kind of cool. I'll bet other nerdy theater people would like to hear this. I thought, we'll do the podcast. But my older daughter, she works in film in post-production, and so she is not the podcast person, but the younger one, who is the actress, is. So
yeah, that's kind of cool, though. You have one that's interested in being on the stage and one that's in the post production. So, yeah.
yes. Oh yeah. Oh, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I find that the best podcasts, and at least the ones that like resonate the most with me, are the shows that people created because they wanted to just talk about their own stuff. right? You're not like, I think I'm going to create this and all of a sudden learn about theater. You were already talking about theater. You made the show about theater. I was already jumping between all kinds of jobs. I made this show to talk about people with different legal careers. And it kind of works, right? Because the audience is you. And so you get to say, well, what would I want to hear? What would I want to talk about? And then you get to share those topics with other people.
Yeah, and that's really what I like about your podcast. It seems really personal to you. And at this stage of the game, what I tell myself is if there's something I want to do, if there's someone that I think I want to get to know, and what's the best way to get to know her? And I thought, well, I'll just drop you a note and see what happens. And your listeners, I know you have law students and you have lawyers and people who may be searching for different careers. Somewhere somebody said you're only 3 conversations away from getting what you want. You just got to have the 3 conversations. And I'm to that point where if I see someone that I think is interesting or something I think is interesting to do, I just do it, because the worst that'll happen is that you'll be told no, or you'll be made fun of, or you'll be yelled at. And we're lawyers, and that has happened to all of us. Usually at work, sometimes in open court. So, and that was what I was listening to your podcast, and I thought, this person sounds like she would be cool to know. That's what I liked about your podcast. It just seems to be very personal to you.
It is. It absolutely is. And, I worked in a big law firm, but not as a practicing attorney. And then I actually went from being like a doc review person to being a paralegal where I had to bill my time. And then I trained and hired paralegals. And Keith, you are a teacher of paralegal technology. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I teach in the paralegal technology program at Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I love it. Well, I've been teaching now over 20 years, and I left the practice of law and became an at-home dad to my 2 daughters. And then, once they got old enough to kind of be on their own and not need me, I started working with a company called Skill Path Seminars and was doing seminars all over the country on time management and employment law. And that would be 6-hour seminars of just me. So you learn how to present pretty quickly when you're doing that 5 days a week, every other week. So that got me into adjunct teaching, and then I got into teaching. And yeah, so definitely a big believer in paralegals. Um, I think they are vital to law firms, and I just love helping them and helping out the firms that they eventually end up working with.
Yeah. So, what is it about teaching paralegal specifically that you love? Is it the fact that, they don't have a lot of the hangups that lawyers have? They're coming in from like, how can I support and how can I really help you, not like fight you?
That's an interesting way of putting it, but well, the one thing, and I've heard you talk about this on your podcast. It's no huge secret that law school, in many ways, does not prepare us to be lawyers. I tell my students, sometimes I feel like we sat around for 3 years and just thought deep thoughts, you know. And so the thing I like about teaching paralegals is that we teach the practical stuff. I teach civil litigation. So we draft the documents, we draft the discovery, we talk about e-discovery, which is just amazing to me. That's such a wild open field that paralegals can be successful in, as sort of a I love having a gamer in my class because they can straddle the line between tech and law, and go into a firm and can kind of translate both sides of that equation. So I love the fact that I'm introducing people to the real practical stuff, and also it kind of amazes them because sometimes all they've seen of lawyers is what's on TV, and we all know that that is not real. So I just love, occasionally, you'll see the light bulb go on when you're teaching in class, and it's like, wow, that was amazing. So yeah, I really enjoy it.
Yeah. So, I think it's really important that you mention what you're teaching, right? The e discovery and drafting and things like that. Because listen, people, paralegals are not secretaries.
No,
They're not.
yeah.
Just because they're writing or you see them walking with papers in their hand, they are not secretaries. So, like, I'll talk to someone and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, we just hired a paralegal and got rid of the secretary." And I'm like, "Why? Those are completely different jobs, right?"
Right.
And even in my firm, I had to explain, we're not just out hiring for just anything. Like, this is a very specific set of skills, a very specific like person who wants to build their time, who is interested in helping but doesn't always want to do the job. Like, it's one thing if you have a paralegal who wants to become an attorney, it's
Hmm.
another to have one who just really excels at handling all of that stuff, right? Like, that's where they want to be. So it is
Right.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, in civil litigation, at least on the plaintiff's side, and I've worked on plaintiffs and the defense side, but on the plaintiff's side, when someone walks into a firm, say a plaintiff's personal injury firm, for the first few months, the person who's going to be most involved with that client is not going to be the attorney. It's going to be the paralegal. The paralegal is going to be getting all the medical information together, is going to be getting the calls from the client, is going to be talking to them more. And, as you approach litigation or as you approach settlement, the attorney is going to get more and more involved. But for a long time, in the process, the person who's going to know more about that case than anybody on earth is going to be the paralegal. And I tell the paralegals, after you do this for a few years, at some point, a client will want to know about settlement. And they will actually ask you, as the paralegal, for advice. And you have to be very careful to say, no, I'm not allowed to give legal advice. And the thing is, you'll actually know the right answer because you'll have the experience, but you have to, not take the temptation to give the legal advice. But yeah, paralegals get heavily involved. I don't know much about criminal law. That is not my specialty. So I'm very open about that with my students. I don't venture into that. But the civil side of things, I think, is really cool and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was working with paralegals in the IP practice, so intellectual
Wow.
property, and we did a lot of like all of the stuff. We even touched on like data analysts and stuff. So it's really really different, but I love that, and I love that you're making sure that they know you are going to be the expert, but that also doesn't mean that you're the decision maker. So there's a lot that you
Right.
can teach. Yeah. So a couple of other things here. You took the Kentucky bar exam.
Right.
Why? Because you're in North Carolina now.
Well, I'm originally from the hills of eastern Kentucky, Appalachia. And it's funny, I used to not tell people this. I took the Kentucky bar exam and flunked it the first time. And I used to be kind of embarrassed about that, but I took it again and passed it. And then we moved to South Carolina, where there was no reciprocity for my wife's job. So I ended up having to take that bar and I passed that bar. And then we moved to North Carolina. Actually, we live still in South Carolina, but I ended up taking the North Carolina bar and passing that one as well. And so at some point I thought, well, I don't know why I'm ashamed that I flunked the first one. I've passed three of them now, but I'm not taking another one. I don't care what happens. I am not taking another bar exam. Yeah. So I practiced in Kentucky and in South Carolina. I actually have not practiced in North Carolina. I just teach the stuff from North Carolina, but not really practiced over there.
So that jumped out at me because my husband and I lived in Kentucky for about 7 years. Our
Really?
daughter was born in Covington, Kentucky. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah. Up near Cincinnati.
she's 4 years old now. And I remember I was a stay at home mom for a while. And I asked my husband, like, do you want to do this? And he was like, no, it's okay. And so I did it for a while. Also, it was during COVID. So it was a little bit easier because a lot of stuff was closed. And then I've recently taken a job working. And now I'm going back to doing it because she'll be in kindergarten in August
Oof.
2025. And I'm like, she'll be home at 3 o'clock. So I'm going to, just hang out with her. All of these recordings will be like moving from 11 in the morning to like 9 in the morning so that then I can just hang out with
Oh,
her.
oh, wow. That's well, and we've talked about this. I was an at-home dad, and because I have a background in journalism, I have an undergrad and a master's in journalism. I started writing humor columns for the newspaper about I was a hotshot attorney, and then suddenly I'm an at-home dad, and it's a world of difference, and so hard. My gosh, being an at-home parent, and you can't describe it until you've done it, but it is brutal.
It's not a demotion. from working
No.
outside of the house. It is still a full-time job.
Oh,
Completely.
yes. Yeah. I mean, there were times I remember, I would get up and at 6 in the morning, I would be getting ready to put laundry in the machine. And then something would happen with one of the kids and things would start. And then finally I would get back to the washing machine and I would look and it would be 6 at night. And I'm like, what happened? Just everything happened. And if my wife came home and said, "What did you do today?" I would almost be in tears and say, "I don't know what I did today. All I know is that it took all day and that I'm exhausted. I haven't stopped. But if you ask me what I did, I just kept these kids alive and tried to keep them out of trouble. And it's just brutal. It's hard, but it's also so rewarding."
I think that's the best description. I have a friend who had a child in November 2024, and she's like, "Why is it so hard? And why are daycare so expensive?" And I'm like, "What price would you put on someone keeping your child alive? There
Yeah.
is no price. There's no price. And mind you, as parents, you're just learning, but at least you can take on that responsibility because it's yours. There's no
Right.
price you can put. And I'm like, honestly, I'm surprised daycare is not $8,000 a month because that's your person.
That's that's right. Yeah. And the thing is, and I'm sure you've felt this as well, you're doing this 24/7 and you realize you have no idea what you're doing. No matter how hard you think you've prepared, the minute that that baby comes into existence and you look and you go, "Oh, I first of all, you become this new being, really, when you see your kid. It's just this, oh wow. I didn't know anybody could feel this way about somebody else." But then it's also, holy cow, I have no idea what to do next. They give you the baby at the hospital and say, "Take it home." And you go, "Wait, where isn't, don't you have something more to tell me about this?" And they're like, "No, no, you're on your own."
Yeah.
And
As long as you have a
it's,
car seat.
that's right. Well, and then even getting the car, I remember struggling to put the car seat in, thinking, "Oh man, this is just the beginning. I'm really clueless."
So this is
Oh,
a great segue because we're actually being joined by your daughter. So I'm going to let her
ah,
jump in.
there,
Hi.
there she is. Hey, darling.
Hi.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the podcast, Fourth Row Center, but we were talking about how complicated it is to have a baby. And then you go, you see them and you're like, I knew you were coming, but also now I just go home with you and keep you alive. Like, it's so surreal.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
my favorite line that dad always talks about is, my mother is a very strong, opinionated woman. She never lets anyone in on emotions, but the story she always says, she brought home my sister and dad just walks in, she's breaking down sobbing and just says, "What have we done? What have
And that
we
is
done?"
that is true.
And the
Yeah.
only
I
thing
love
I
it.
can relate to that is bringing home my little 4-month-old puppy and saying the exact same thing about 10 minutes later and saying, "What have I done?"
So do you still have the puppy or is it
I
a
do,
bigger dog?
yes. He's right here. He's 6 months now. And I still say that from time to time. What have I
Yeah.
done? But,
Yeah.
it brings me joy as kids, I'm sure, do.
Yeah, I have a 4-year-old and she wants a puppy. And I'm like, when you want to go play, we can tell you no. We
Oh,
can't
yeah.
do that with a puppy. I'm like,
No,
I don't know.
exactly.
A 4-year-old, and no offense, Kara, when they're 4, they can walk and they can get into such trouble. And I've said that if you called the cops and described what was going on, but did not say it was a 4-year-old doing the stuff, they would say, "Get out of the house immediately. There's a maniac on the loose." And the only reason you stay is because they're cute, they're adorable, and they're your kids. But man,
Yeah, it's definitely
I'm
tough.
sure.
So, Kara, we invited you because your dad has written a book, as you know, and then you two host the Fourth Row Center podcast together.
Hmm.
So, the first question is, what was it like growing up with a dad who was a lawyer? And did you guys tease him like you're not a lawyer anymore? What was that like?
Oh, well, I was thinking about this earlier because I thought this would be a question. And it really never even occurred to me that he was a lawyer at all. And he would always say, "Oh, I'm a recovering attorney." And so I would like walk into a fifth grade class and they'd be like, "Oh, what does your dad do?" "Oh, he's a recovering attorney." And dad would always get laughed at, but I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And so until much later in life. So, it was just he was just dad. But I will say, I didn't remember this, but he always talks about how whenever we would get upset at a store or have a breakdown at home, he, instead of getting angry, he would almost do like a very lawyerly thing, and instead of like badgering us, he would be very empathetic and repeat what we had to say. He always talks about how that is like his
That
way to calm down a child, and it works. And I almost feel like that was probably something he got from something he learned in school. But yeah, he was, I think to be a lawyer, you have to be very empathetic in all that you do. And so, that's how we grew up, is with him just understanding more so than being angry and getting really upset with us. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
great. No
It
teasing
was
though, until now, as in adulthood, we tease him all the time about everything, but
yeah.
My husband, he works from home 100%. He's like right over here. And so my daughter, he'll take her to school and she's like, "You're just going back home to watch TV." We're like, "No, he works a whole job." And she's like, "Okay, Dad, go back home." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing."
yeah.
Kids are brutal.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
Dad, do you remember me teasing you at all?
No, as a matter of fact, two stories about you. First of all, the best Kara story, which is in the book. And the book, by the way, a promo here. My Boss Wears Diapers. Um, Tales from a Frazzled Dad is what it's called. But the best story is one time I was dropping Kara off at school, and she had been running a fever, and then we had dosed it. And this is probably not good parenting, but we had dosed her up, and the fever was gone. But as I was taking her to school, I said, "Look, I'm going to make an appointment. I'm going to pull you out of school and take you to the pediatricians." And she said, don't do that. I feel fine." And I said, no, I'm going to do it. She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because your mom wants me. I told your mom I would, and we need to." And I said, "One of these days you'll understand." I said, you'll be grown up and you'll be married to a guy like me, and you'll tell him to do stuff, and you'll want him to do it." And she said, "No, that'll never happen." And I thought she was going to say, "Well, I'll never get married or I'll never have kids or whatever." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Because there are no other guys like you."
Oh,
Goodness.
what wisdom.
Yeah. So, I went home and changed the will after that.
Thank the Lord for that.
Yeah.
I
But
love that. That's so sweet.
yeah. And then the other story is how I taught Kara how to deal with people, which is when we would be on vacation. If you're the dad and you're in a house with girls, you always need to take a shower at 6 a.m. and just get out of the room because, it's girl place. So I would always be in the lobby. And then the next person who would come down would be Kara. And at some point, she came in one day and I started pretending that I didn't know her just to pass the time. And so we would start pretending we didn't know each other and start asking questions of each other to get to know each other, and eventually get to the point where I would say, "Wait a minute, you're my daughter Kara, aren't you?" But we would play this game, and Kara is great when she meets people. And on the podcast when she interviews people, she's amazing. And I of course I want to take credit for that.
All that
No,
practice.
you should. All that practice.
You're welcome.
And I don't even know how you thought of that, but that really did help. And I'm a server now. That's my main job here as of late. And yeah, that's literally how I got to where I am, because I could just talk to anyone. So, good job, Dad.
I love it. Oh, that's so great. I think that's so cool. I don't know. I'm just like, I will ask my dad if he wants to start a podcast. We need to do that.
No, it's great. And, we do have hopefully more episodes coming. And so it's always very fun. And, Dad, I don't know if he told you, but I am in New York to be an actor of some sort in some way. And that, it's through his passion for theater too. He's a man of many traits. So, he's a lawyer, he's a theatrical guy. lighting design, he does everything. But yeah, it's his love for theater, so we started the podcast and love it together, so why not?
Yeah.
And it gives
Yeah.
us an
So,
excuse to chat a little bit.
Yeah.
yeah, of course. So I have to say, because you two are used to this, right? This is what you do. But most people are not just starting podcasts with their dad and talking about theater and recording in different cities and states, right? Like, what is it like when you tell other people? Are they completely shocked, or are they just, impressed, or what?
They're mostly like that. That's so cool. Like, I wish I
Yeah.
could do exact same thing that you just said. I wish I could sit down with my dad and have a podcast too. But and I do have to give credit to you know Keith. He's the engineer of everything. There would be no podcast without him, because I certainly couldn't edit it and do all of that. So he's kind of the brains of the operation. So
Yeah.
if it wasn't for him and his want to do that, we wouldn't have a podcast. So
I mean, I think the reason for the podcast is because so we could just talk to each other. It's about something that we love, and we do interviews. Really, we've had some Broadway folks on there, and it's been a pretty cool experience. I'm really lucky because I love both of my daughters, and I also like both of them.
Because there's a
Which,
difference.
I'm
yeah,
sure
there
there's a
is.
difference. Yeah.
Um, during the pandemic, I was happy as a clam because both daughters were home. The house was noisy again. It was just so much fun. Uh, so, I mean, there were obviously downsides to a pandemic, but if there's a silver lining, that was it.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. My daughter was born in June 2020.
Oh
So
wow.
we
Oh
were
dear.
the three musketeers, all of us in our apartment. Like, that was all we knew. And even now, we've moved back to our hometown and people are like, "Can we come see the baby?" And I'm like, we don't even offer to take her places because we're used to it just being us. I'm going to talk something else about being related, and so either of you can answer this. How has podcasting made you closer to each other while sharing with the entire audience?
Hmm.
Ooh. Dad, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's interesting to actually collaborate on something with your kid. Like what we do is the structure of the podcast is there's an intro part where it's just Kara and me talking to each other. We will have recorded an interview earlier with our guest. And what we do is we have this cute intro that we do that's a back and forth thing. And so we actually have to write that together. Um, so what we do is we go on Facebook Live while we are composing that. And so, and while we're actually taping that intro as well. And sometimes we'll do this I'll start by saying on today's Fourth Row Center podcast, and then she'll say, we're going to be interviewing so and so, and then we do a back and forth, and it always ends with turn off those cell phones, unwrap that candy, and settle in. You've got the best seat in the house. You are Fourth Row Center. But the stuff that comes before that, we have to write, and sometimes we record it and we don't like it, and so on the spot we'll have to talk to each other. I just don't like the way those words sound, or why don't you do that part and I'll do the other part. And it's this creative thing that I don't think a whole lot of parents get to do. And it's the input. I'll do something and she'll say I don't like it, and she'll give me notes on what I've written and what I say, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I really love doing
And on
that.
the other side for me, and this is kind of interesting, and sorry to say this, Dad, but for me, it almost makes him a little more human, in the sense of I've been able to actually see more of his insecurities come out. And that sounds a little bad. Sorry, Dad. But when you grow
No.
up with someone, you don't see that they're
Yeah.
necessarily vulnerable, and you see that they have these things. Like, I'm just like him in the sense that I seek approval a lot in everything I do. And so, we'll record that intro and then he'll be like, "Was that good? Do you think?" Like, he's like asking, and I'm like, "Oh, so you're like a people pleaser, you need to get these good notes back too." And so,
Yeah.
that's been really cool to see. And then he now wants to do voiceover work, and it's a new Keith Shannon opening up. before my eyes. So it's cool to see. I love it.
Yeah. Once you get one microphone, that's a wrap. Like you want to get into
Yeah.
everything. I want to narrate
Absolutely.
books. I want to do all this stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
an
Sorry, go ahead,
audio
Dad.
book of my book.
That's exactly
Um,
what I was going to say.
a-
And you need to, because I read the book personally and I hear his voice because I grew up with him, but no one else really gets to hear that. So I think
Hmm.
it'd be good for him to do it.
Yes, absolutely. So how do you two keep it fun without making it all business?
It stays the same. We never speak in a business tone. And I think that
Okay.
is because it's about theater and
Yeah.
I always say things are not that deep. It's not that deep, but we take it as just something fun and like a hobby. So I think we always kind of just talk to each other with this kind of banter. Now, sometimes Dad is a man full of ideas, and sometimes he'll just rattle off these ideas in text, and he'll be like, "You didn't respond," and I'm like, "Well, Dad, you sent me 20 texts. I'm so sorry. I love you so much." But that's when it becomes a bit much when he's just
Yeah.
like spitfiring ideas. Dad, anything else?
No, that's okay. But you're right. I mean, the title of the podcast is not rocket science. It's a passion project of something that we love, and by two people who love each other. So it's a good mix.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
sorry,
love
there's
that.
not more in depth answers
No.
to that. We're just
No.
we're super simple people, unfortunately.
No, the premise of this whole show is having a law degree and doing everything outside of that, right? So I want to talk about all the real stuff that you actually do because the court stuff is boring. And honestly, most people talk about that. I want to talk about the humans.
Mm-hmm.
So no, this is exactly what I wanted.
I love
So
that.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my last question, and I ask this on every episode, it was going to be directed at Keith, which is what would you say to a lawyer about what they can do with their law degree? But Kara, I also want to know for you, what would you say to a creative about what they can do with their creativity?
Oh, okay. Well, Dad, do you want to answer the lawyer thing first while I give this a think?
I knew you would do that.
Yeah, because that's good. That's a good question.
Yeah. So my advice to a law student is sort of what I mentioned before. Don't be scared to pursue whatever. An example, when I was a law student, the NBC Supreme Court reporter was this guy named Carl Stern, right? It's way before your time, but anyway, he was the Supreme Court reporter on the NBC network. And I was a law student with a journalism degree. And I thought, well, I wonder, maybe I want to be a reporter. And so I thought, gosh, it would be cool to talk to him. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to talk to him. So I picked up the phone, got the number for NBC in New York, got into NBC News, and just tried to sound as important as I could, and said, "Carl Stern, please." And suddenly, this guy picks up the phone and says, "This is Carl Stern," and I'm like, "Cool." So we just talked, and I've done that a million times. Just called somebody out of the blue. And sometimes it works, and sometimes they say, "Leave me alone," and that's okay. My advice would be the 3 conversations thing. Find out as much as you can about the profession. Invite people to coffee, invite people to lunch, and make it clear that you're not trying to get them to give you a job, because that'll turn them off. Just make it informational. I just want to know about the profession, and also I want to know about you. Make it about them and their experience. And I think you'll be successful if you pursue that.
I love that. So I speak to a lot of lawyers who are creative. I'm extremely creative. I have the podcast, I have YouTube videos, I do all kinds of stuff. And so I want to inspire lawyers and law students to remember how creative they are, to think about, yeah, I did read that case law and come up with this great idea, or I did negotiate that whatever, right? Because all of these things are forms of creativity. So, as someone who lives in New York and actually wants to be on stage, in theater, on a film, entertaining the masses, what would you say to someone about how they can use their creativity?
Oh man, this is hard. I didn't know this would be a test here. Okay. No, but there's so many ways to use creativity, but to find a creative outlet is sometimes hard. I would just say to anyone who wants to be creative in general, whether it's a hobby, a profession, find like minded people to surround yourself with. For me, I need that accountability. I started my own YouTube channel at the beginning of the year because I needed something to hold me accountable for. I was like, 2025 is going to be my year, but it's not going to be my year if I'm going to sit on my couch and just, do nothing. So,
Yeah.
I need people like dad, like my best friends who work in theater, work in TV and film to kind of, push me to do other things like that. So I would just say, use your creativity to build your own community so that they can kind of build you up with whatever you want to do, wherever you want to take that creative route.
Yeah.
But
I mean, your creativity has brought you to a lawyer/career podcast. So that's kind of
exactly.
cool.
Well, it's dad's creativity, but I'm here with it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I love it. So do you two have any questions for me or anything else you want to say?
yeah, what is your favorite creative outlet? What is your favorite thing that you do outside of all of this?
Yeah. My favorite creative outlet is cooking. I love to cook.
Wow.
Yeah, my
Oh my
daughter and I just made a
gosh.
pizza last night, and I made a reel about it because I was like, cooking with a toddler takes forever. I should have had a snack first. And it's true, but also, like, that's the only way she's going to learn. And, like, she's literally putting the pizza sauce on a teaspoon at a time. And I'm just like, I'm so hungry. But also, I'm like, she's 4. Let her go. Right. My husband's
Mhm.
over there eating fries. I was like, you should have brought me something. So that's my favorite creative outlet. Right. And then I love to see things through her eyes because she's like, I built this pizza. And then she wants to rewatch the video 8 times like it's not her. And I'm just
Oh,
like, what is that like for her to keep rewatching? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Herself making this pizza that she just ate. So cooking is by far my favorite.
that's really cool.
oh wow.
How long have you been
Yeah.
Have
doing that? Was that like a typical like COVID thing that you started doing, or has this been like a forever thing for you?
This has been forever because I used to really enjoy hosting people, like having a dinner party, but I'm actually an introvert. So I think, I don't know if that was just something that we did, but like COVID definitely helped me to be like, oh, I actually don't want anyone in my house.
Yeah.
But like ever since she was a baby, like she was probably like maybe a year, and I'm showing her how to peel garlic or like, dump the flour into the bowl because I'm like, it's science, it's creative, it's going to taste good at the end.
Mhm.
So I've always been having her kind of help me. Like you should see her crack an egg. Like she's got it down pat. So my husband wants to eat. He's not interested in preparing, and she could be my little sous chef. So yeah.
oh
I
wow.
love that. Wait, okay. Now I feel like I want to interview you. But I have a final question, and this has nothing to
Yes.
do with anything. But how is it being an introvert and doing creative things like this where you are open to the public?
Yeah. So I'm actually getting ready to sell these shirts that say homebody extrovert because I think I'm more of just a homebody. Like if you would not think I was an introvert. I'm talking to the lady at the cashier. Oh my God, your name is so pretty. Oh, how was your afternoon? How was your this? But then I'm at home for 3 days. Introverts just have to have that time by themselves to
Definitely.
give time to other people. Like if I have a big event or if I'm giving a speech somewhere, I need like 4 days. Like, mom, can you come hang out with the baby? Because I need to just like, okay. And then once I get there, you would never know. You would
Mhm.
never know. But I have to like store up that energy by myself. So it's okay. I just have to give myself that grace.
Yeah.
One of our first trips my husband and I took, we went to New York for like 8 days or something. And he had this whole itinerary. And I didn't say this because I didn't know it at the time, but like we didn't do any of that because if we're out one day, the next day we're doing nothing. I'm talking takeout. I'm talking, and he will do that now. He'll go out on his own and be like, okay, well, I'm going to go out today. And I'm like, that's fine because I was out yesterday. So now he knows to just plan our trips like that because
Mhm.
I'm not, so
That's so cool though. That's a great mix cuz you can kind of turn it on and then take your time off and you know that you need that and then you can rest, restore, rejuvenate and then get back
yeah.
to it. I love that.
Yeah, it took a while to figure out, but now that I know, I'm like, this is great. And to what you guys were saying earlier, when I look at my daughter, I'm trying to be like, she's not just saying no or being rebellious. What is she trying to tell us? And I
Mhm.
think that comes from being a lawyer because for one, I taught her how to negotiate. You should see her when it's time for books. And she's like, I only want to read one book. And we're like, okay. And then she'll pick up the dictionary. And I'm like, Now, you
Genius.
know, we are not about to read, but I'm like, it is one book, and my husband's looking at me like, oh, you are not reading. I'm like, she wasn't within the parameters. But we look at her, and it's definitely from the counselor at law side of being a lawyer,
Mhm.
where I am like, she's a person trying to communicate with us, even if she's just four. What is she trying to tell us? And it does bring a different aspect to parenting. So,
Yeah.
Sure.
yeah.
Well, and that does get into my one parenting tip, which Kara referred to earlier, which is, and I just discovered this by accident. And at 4, she may be beyond this, probably too smart for this to work. But when a kid is in the store and they're saying, "I want that," I want that. Usually, that it's like, "No, no, you can't have that." Well, what I would say, "You want that, don't you? Don't you want that?" And when someone says no, you can see them physically tense up. But when you say, "You want that, don't you?" they know that you understand and they don't get tense like that. And it's much easier to distract them, because you're pushing the cart as you're saying, "You want that, don't you? You want that, don't, oh, look, a giraffe," or something like that. And they're not dug in. But I knew for both girls at one point, both of them turned to me and said, "Why are you repeating what I said?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, that phase is done."
We got to come back and do this again when she hits like middle school, elementary school, middle school, because I want to hear. This is going to be a crazy ride to see the difference here.
When she's in middle school, if we come back, I have a feeling there will be a fourth window open, and it will be her,
Yeah.
or she will be your producer.
Right. And she'll probably be a paid producer at that. And I'll be like,
Absolutely, yes.
yes, yeah, completely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Keith and Kara. I really appreciate it. Bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.